The identity of the Zodiac Killer is one of the most frustrating mysteries in the history of serial murder. After a reign of terror across the Bay Area that claimed upwards of 5 confirmed dead, 2 wounded and possibly many more unaccounted for, the killer abruptly vanished. The San Francisco Police Department interviewed many suspects during the investigation, but none were considered as promising as Arthur Leigh Allen. Interviewed during the early days of the investigation, he became the subject of several search warrants over a 20-year period, none of which provided any evidence of his guilt. Despite the mostly circumstantial evidence against him, Allen has remained strongly associated with the Zodiac case, and many veteran police detectives considered him to be the most likely suspect. Allen was first revealed in Robert Graysmith's book Zodiac in 1986, and those who found an interest in the case could now learn about one man Graysmith referred to as Robert Hall Starr. However, those who were more familiar with the case would come to realize that the pseudonym Starr was based on Arthur Leigh Allen, a man who would go on to confound investigators and armchair sleuths to the present day. Allen first came to the attention of the Vallejo Police Department in early October 1969, but exactly how he came to be a point of interest remains unclear. Possibly thousands of names had been put forward to the authorities, the grounds for which had been on the smallest pretext, but resulted in placing those people under police suspicion. There was at the time a rumor that Allen had received a speeding ticket near Lake Berryessa on the night of Shepard's murder, but this was later determined to be false. He was simply one of many Vallejo residents for whom the finger of suspicion was directed, leading the police to conduct an interview to determine if Allen was the Zodiac. Detective John Lynch of the Vallejo Police Department was one of the officers assigned to investigate the attack at Blue Rock Springs, during which 22-year-old Darlene Ferrin was shot and killed, and was actively pursuing suspects in relation to this incident. For some inexplicable reason, Lynch attended Elmer Cave Elementary School on October 6, 1969, where he spoke with a suspect who was later identified as Arthur Leigh Allen. Lynch questioned Allen on his whereabouts during the attack at Lake Berryessa, which occurred a week prior to the interview. Lynch states that Allen claimed he was skin diving on Salt Point Ranch on September 26, 1969, where he stayed overnight and then returned to Vallejo the following day, staying at home for the remainder of the day. The brief report makes no mention of further questioning concerning Allen's whereabouts on the dates of other known Zodiac murders. It would be only 5 days after this interview that the Zodiac shot and killed cab driver Paul Stein, in what would be the last known murder committed by the Zodiac. The events which then led to a deeper investigation of Allen began on July 15, 1971, when Santo Panzarella, a Southern California businessman, entered the Manhattan Beach Police Department to provide information he had about the Zodiac case. Panzarella said that Allen once made incriminating remarks to Donald Cheney, who was Panzarella's business partner, that alluded to the fact he was the killer. On this statement, the Manhattan PD sent 2 detectives to interview Panzarella and Cheney at their business premises, where they were told a fascinating story. Cheney explained he had formed a friendship with Allen for several years before he moved to Southern California, and recalled a conversation they had during December 1968 in Allen's Fresno Street basement. The topic they discussed was that of recreational hunting. However, it soon took a sinister turn when Allen brought up his interest in Richard Connell's classic short story The Most Dangerous Game, in which a crazed count hunts shipwrecked travelers who become stranded on his private island, and which had become a popular fictional story. Allen mentioned he had become fascinated with the story, citing it as one of his favorites, adding that he identified with the count and his proclivity for hunting humans for sport. Allen then went into more detail about his hypothetical plan for committing a series of murders of couples in lovers' lanes. Cheney explained that he went on to describe how he would perpetrate these murders, quoting Allen as saying he would use a revolver or pistol with a flashlight attached to some for illumination and an aiming device, and would walk up and shoot people. Allen also talked about shooting the tires of a school bus and picking off the little darlings as they came bouncing off the bus, and went on to say that he would send harassing notes to the police. If this was not enough, Allen also allegedly stated that he would call himself Zodiac. Detectives noted the response in their report. Cheney replied, "Zodiac, why's that? Why not something else?" Arthur Allen at this time became very emotional and stated, "I like the name Zodiac and that's the name I'm going to use." Cheney's account of this conversation, which apparently took place in December 1968, would make a strong case against Allen for being the Zodiac. This was primarily because the information wouldn't have been revealed until almost a full year, when the details of the first Zodiac attack at Lake Herman Road were described in the Zodiac's first communication in August 1969. Similarly, the Zodiac's threat to target a school bus was not made public until later in the year, October 1969. The most perplexing part of these revelations concerns Cheney's timing in sharing these comments with the police almost 2 years later. Cheney moved away to Southern California in January 1969, and it is possible he did not hear about the circumstances of the second Zodiac attack at Vallejo. However, the murder of Paul Stine in downtown San Francisco on October 11, 1969, received national press attention, and it is impossible that residents of Southern California were not aware of the mysterious serial killer calling himself the Zodiac who targeted couples and lone victims, then wrote threatening letters to the newspapers detailing his crimes. Both Cheney and Ponzarella confirmed they read news articles in the Los Angeles Times about the Zodiac murders, but it was another series of murders which led to Cheney revealing all he knew on Allen. In 1971, Cheney read about a completely obscure and unrelated series of unsolved murders which occurred in Grass Valley, CA, a small town about 150 miles north of Vallejo and San Francisco. It was these recent killings which prompted Cheney's suspicions about Allen to the forefront of his memory. If this was the case, it seems odd that the reports on the Zodiac murders which detailed a killer identical to Allen's description did not register with Cheney, but the series of unrelated murders managed to jog his memory. Almost as perplexing as Cheney's apparent ignorance of the Zodiac's subsequent crimes was the evidently careless disregard Allen had for keeping the planning of his crimes a secret, given how careful and precise the Zodiac had been in the execution of his murders. A revealing detail in the MBPD report concerned a past incident in which Allen was found to have touched Cheney's young daughter inappropriately during a camping trip years prior, for which Cheney had complained to Allen's brother. It was believed this presented enough of a motive for Cheney to make allegations, however truthful, against Arthur Leigh Allen. This allegation would present some truth given that Allen had previously lost his job as an elementary school teacher in March 1968 due to similar allegations of sexual misconduct with students. By most accounts, Allen was generally well liked by those who knew him. However, he was considered somewhat eccentric. He would have a somewhat strained relationship with his mother that would persist throughout his life. He grew up in Vallejo, California, and graduated from Vallejo High in 1950, and later attended Vallejo College where he majored in liberal arts, receiving his Associate of Arts degree in 1957. During that time, at the age of 19, he applied to the Vallejo Police Department, but was rejected for an unspecified reason. After enrolling for further education at Cal Poly State College, Allen enlisted in the U.S. Navy in 1957, something that would cast further suspicion on him being the Zodiac, who it was suspected had a strong affinity with the military. Allen was arrested in June 1958 for disturbing the peace. However, the charges were later dropped, and at the age of 25 he received an other than honorable discharge from the U.S. Navy. Between 1959 and 1962, Allen attempted to gain his teaching credentials, and was hired by the Santa Rosa Elementary School in Atascadero, California. During that time he found an interest in the study of abnormal psychology and studied mental hygiene at Atascadero State Hospital, where he would later receive treatment for his pedophilic disorder. While working at Travis Elementary, at Travis Air Force Base, Allen was caught with a loaded weapon in his car on school grounds, and fired from his position. Sometime in 1964-65, he suffered a motorcycle accident and was incapacitated with a severely lacerated leg wound. Finding employment at Valley Spring Elementary in Valley Springs, Allen continued with his teaching profession throughout 1966 to 1968. During the Zodiac investigation, it was found that Allen had never been married or had a girlfriend, and possessed a strong hatred of women, as well as a less than healthy fixation on young children. While working at Valley Springs, he was accused of molesting a child, which ended his teaching career in 1968. It was the December of 1968 when Don Cheney claimed that Allen had revealed his plans to become the Zodiac, and also during this Christmas holiday that he received a Zodiac watch from his mother as a gift. By April 1969, Allen was living back home with his parents, and secured a part-time job at a gas station in Vallejo. He worked for an approximately 6-month period. He was later fired, and his former employer would describe him in August 1971 as undependable with a drinking problem, and was also said to be too interested in small girls. On July 4, 1969, the Zodiac attacked 22-year-old Darlene Farron and her friend 19-year-old Michael Mayhew, while the two sat in Mayhew's car in Blue Rock Springs. A lone occupant drove up to the couple, got out of his vehicle and fired several shots at the young friends, seriously wounding Mayhew and killing Farron. The subsequent police investigation worked on the assumption that Darlene Farron possibly knew her killer, and shortly after her murder, a relative informed investigators that Darlene had a relationship of some sort with a man named Leigh. At the time, Allen had begun working part-time as a janitor at Elmer Cave Elementary School in Vallejo until 1970. During his time there, the Zodiac sent letters threatening to blow up a school bus full of children. On October 6, 1969, Allen was questioned by Detective John Lynch of the Vallejo Police Department. Allen owned several handguns, one of which he allegedly always kept in his car, and he apparently enjoyed the level of notoriety that came with his 1969 interview with Detective Lynch, and bragged openly that he was a Zodiac suspect. From 1970 until 1974, Allen attended Sonoma State College, where he majored in biological sciences, with a minor in chemistry. Although he completed all the academic requirements in 1974, he did not receive his Bachelor of Science degree until after July 1981. During his time at the college, several girls and young women went missing and were later found dead, their bodies discovered in areas around Allen's Santa Rosa trailer. Soon after the interview with Cheney and Ponzarella, Detectives Langstaff and Amos of the Manhattan Beach Police conducted a background check to gather basic information on Allen. It was then that they came across his 1958 arrest for disturbing the peace and the subsequent dismissal of those charges. Langstaff then made contact with Inspector McKenna of the SFPD Homicide Division and informed him of the details surrounding Cheney's story. McKenna then suggested that Cheney should correspond with Allen so they could obtain a sample of his handwriting for comparison, and asked that Langstaff forward a report compiled by Chief Crumpley to Inspector Dave Toski, who was in charge of the Zodiac case. Toski's partner, SFPD Inspector William Armstrong, went to speak with Cheney on July 26, 1971. Their discussions lasted 11 days, and Cheney displayed an amazing ability for accessing his past memories, which presented an even more damning indictment of Allen's guilt. Firstly, he now remembered that the conversation with Allen had taken place a full year earlier, making the date of the alleged confession as December 1967 instead of 1968. He then declared that Allen had inquired how a person could disguise their own handwriting, the subject of which Cheney claimed he even offered his advice. In subsequent interviews, he also recalled how the conversation with Allen had not been initiated by mention of the most dangerous game, but rather with Allen declaring how his application to become a police officer was rejected. So instead, he decided to pursue a criminal career, eluding detection by committing crimes with no motive. This story would change again, with Cheney telling investigators that Allen shrouded his murderous statements as part of plans to write a crime novel. The Zodiac had not been definitively linked to the kidnapping of Kathleen Johns, and the victim had ruled Allen out as the man responsible for disabling her car and proceeding to take her on the terrifying ordeal she endured with her baby through rural San Joaquin County. Cheney weaved this incident into his story too, adding that Allen described how he had the idea to disable a woman's car by removing the lug nuts from her wheels. Lastly, he declared to Armstrong it was not the news article about the Grass Valley murders which instigated his contacting police with his concerns, but a newspaper article about the Zodiac's threat to kill school children. This, he said, is why he remembered, because these words were similar to Allen's own comments about picking off little darlings. Cheney's account cannot be considered reliable because of his constant changing of the timeline and contortion of the facts to fit his own theory of Allen as the Zodiac Killer. It is possible that over time, Cheney's recollection of the conversations he had with Allen had become distorted, and ultimately melded with news accounts he had read, which then formed an all too convenient scapegoat in Arthur Leigh Allen. Thank you for listening to part 1 of the Zodiac. Be sure to hit the notification bell so that you know when we upload new true crime videos.